Okay. So the law of spiritual approach. What this is about, there's a couple ways of looking at this, but the key to this, I think, is this, is that one of the big differences between the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius and the new kind of emerging service is the idea that there are certain laws, there is a law of approach, but approach to what? It has to do with approach to the hierarchy. It has to do with the approach to the inner government, and that there are laws associated with that. Now, let's explore this for just a minute. What would you say would be the primary method in history that the inner government that humanity has sought to approach the inner government in the past? Pardon me? Prayer. That's exactly right, prayer. So prayer has been a method of approach, a method of approach. And prayer has a lot to do with the heart. Prayer has a lot to do with feeling divinity, feeling God, and lifting the spirit up. And there's a kind of heartfelt appeal that is related to prayer. And prayer has that sense of trying to connect, appeal. There's a kind of yielding to the will of God and an uncertainty whether the prayer will come to be, but a genuine desire for it to happen, whatever the prayer is for. It's very much a heart connection in many ways. But we're told in this philosophy that as we move into the Aquarian age, another methodology will slowly, over the next several centuries, take the next step beyond it. Does anybody know what that is? Well, it's connected to meditation, but it's called the law of something else. Say again? What? Yes, that's exactly right. The law of invocation. The law of invocation, which is believed to be the next step to manifest this law of spiritual approach. So what's invocation? It's a calling forth, but it includes a much more of the mind principle in it than just the heart. It's got both heart and mind together. Okay? The law of invocation says this, that when you orient your consciousness correctly with a well-developed mind that is completely committed to service to the greater whole, and a heart that's ablaze with Christ, you have the ability to invoke insight, direction from that inner government, from the ashram. When we say the law of invocation, it's actually called the law of invocation-evocation. To invoke means to use your higher mind and your heart and configure it in a way that makes it invocative, which is like the appeal to the greater life. Now, when it's done correctly, the greater life, in this case we're calling the ashram the greater life, that greater life will respond, and its response is called evocation. So invocation is the upward yearning, and evocation is the response. But there's a scientific element to it that goes beyond prayer, because if it is done correctly, the evocative response is a certainty. In fact, the greater life has no choice but to respond. Whereas in prayer, there is uncertainty. Now, why is that so? The difference is because in the world of prayer, there's a subtle assumption that there's God, and there's me, and there's a gulf, and that somehow I need to appeal to get over the gulf and seek God's favor and support. Esotericism says, actually, that's an illusion. There is no gulf. In fact, There's only one thing in existence, and that's the one life. That is God, if you want to use that term. That is God, and that you and I are extensions of the one. It's the one becoming the many. That's what I said when I showed you the monad, and I said the monad is the spark that arises from the one flame. So there's a different way of relating to the greater life when you realize that you're a mere extension of that greater life, as compared to relating to the greater life with the assumption that somehow you have this gulf between you and it. And how do you extend? A heart ablaze with Christ and a higher mind that understands what's happening here. Now, this invocation is multi-layered too for us to think about as we wield this law of spiritual approach. For instance, in meditation, what you're trying to do is that very thing. Today, the meditation that I led today has the potential of an evocative tendency. The idea was to guide your thoughts and configure your consciousness, and then extend your sense of upward focus with a conviction, with a knowingness that a response would happen, and I think I worded it as a seed would be planted in your consciousness. That's the evocative response. Now, if the meditation is done really well, and you've eliminated a lot of the tangential thoughts that do come up in meditation, if you hadn't noticed, but that can happen. But if you can really hold yourself aligned with a sense of will and purpose and complete selflessness, that seed that I suggested in the meditation that was planted is unavoidable. That will be planted. So one example of the use of the law of invocation-evocation is right there in these kinds of meditations. It's not the kind of meditation that says go into the void and just drift. That's a more mystical meditation. I just want to drift into the love of God. That has its place, by the way. But that's the evolution of meditation, is not just to go in through love, but go in through intelligence and realize that you can be an intelligent agent on behalf of the greater life, and that your mind, your higher mind, is a tool to create that intelligent relationship. That's why it's called it's scientific brotherhood. It's scientific in the sense that there's an intelligent understanding of the process. Now, truthfully, we don't have the whole understanding of it. I mean, the Tibetan gave a lot of information on it, but bits and pieces all over the place. And one of the ways to really get a deeper handle on it is to, assemble all of those references and put them under the eye. And then we might be able to get a deeper understanding of this. And that's what people are doing. But the other thing to keep in mind about this is that it's not just meditation. It's about the asana of your life. You know the word asana? Asana? Asana is, like in yoga, when you get into a position, a posture, that's called an asana, a posture. But I'd like you to think about that word asana beyond a physical. Think about your life as an asana. What is the posture of the way you live your life? What is the posture of how you think, how you feel, how you interface with the outer world? That's a greater kind of asana. And depending upon how that posture is, that in itself can be an invocation. That in itself can trigger an evocative response. So it's more than just meditation. It's life and how you live it, and how you posture your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your interactions. All of that becomes an evocative appeal, and it will generate, if rightly generated, and the integrity of that asana is sound, it will generate an evocative response. It's kind of how it works. So, that's what this is about. The law of spiritual approach. How to do that more effectively. And the new group of world servers is trying to learn how to do that.
The evocative response, I'm trying to understand, is it something like that kind of flows out of this asana, or is it something that's given?
Okay, so the question is this asana, is the evocative response something that flows out of the asana of your life, or is it given? By the hierarchy. Well, it's kind of, I would say sort of, it's both. It's given by the hierarchy, but must flow through the asana. It does flow through the asana, but it's not from the asana. It's through the asana. It's through the posturing of your life. What happens here is that there's a whole thing called the circumstantial deva, where intelligences that shape circumstance are often how the evocative response will occur. In other words, don't just think of the way, it's not just your alignment this way that is important, that's essential, but the response can sometimes come through you as new insight. That could be the response. Or the response can come through an unfolding circumstance. Okay? Suddenly a door opens that you didn't know existed. The right person crosses your path at exactly the right time. Your lower self may say, wow, that was luck. But on a higher level, that's actually an intelligence that, for lack of a better term, I'm calling circumstantial deva. Deva represents intelligence, greater intelligences. And the hierarchy utilizes deva. The hierarchy utilizes a vast array of intelligences, and one of those categories of intelligence is the shaping of circumstance. So that the way opens up, and eventually the more you can live your life in an asana of high integrity, the more you don't have to push your life through, the more it invites you in to the correct direction rather than pushing yourself into the place. You get that? You get that?
So would the new group of world servers, would they have a specific intelligence working on behalf of the new group of world servers, that once the initiates or the disciples of the world servers come to a stage, they can access that intelligence specifically to bring forth the...
That's right. So the question, if I understand it, is that does the new group of world servers, when they come to a certain point in their evolution, do they have a more conscious capacity to trigger that effect and those intelligences to support them? Is that what you're saying?
Or do they have a specific intelligence working on behalf of just the new group of world servers? Is there a group of deva that have come together specifically for the new group of world servers?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so the question is there a particular type of deva that's dedicated largely just to the new group of world servers? And truthfully, I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I've not thought about that, nor have I read anything about that. But in principle, that could be so. That could be so. I'm not sure. Yeah. And so look at your life as an interface between the posture of your life, the alignment you hold, and how the larger system is seeking to either cooperate with your alignment or not. And so the idea is that you get into right alignment, and unfolding pattern will occur at the right time. At the right time. There's some rules in the white magic study that kind of pertain to this sort of thing. there's conditions, I guess, is what I'm saying. It's not just that you hold an asana in the patterns of your life, but you hold an alignment vertically, and how well you hold that alignment throughout the fabric of your day is how you earn that's part of the posture. Part of the posture is to hold yourself in a high place while effectively living your outer life in a low place. And if you can hold that high place and not let it drop, the more you can do that with the least amount of drop during the day, the more you will create the evocative response that then opens the doors and shapes the circumstance and invites you in. Okay? Okay, so it's just something that all of us need to be focused on. It's really important. Okay, because see, each one of us, that's also what makes you a better implementer of the plan. That's another definition of the new group of world servers. They're the implementers of the plan.